everybody have your objective grade sheet things? Yep. All right, yeah, let's look at the front page. 4 objectives instead of 5. In this poetry unit, we are not doing the conventions objective, the spelling, grammar, that kind of thing, because in order to make it a normal, decent piece of writing, that's something you're going to have to do anyway. It's just not something I'm looking exactly for. So if you misspell one word, I'm not going to mark you off for it. I may make a note of it so that you know, but it's not really going to affect your grade. Now, if you misspell every word in the poem, is it going to affect your grade? Yeah, it's going to make it real hard to read and real difficult to get through. So it's probably going to affect your grade in some way, but conventions is not its own particular grade this time. Other than that, all these objectives are the same as they were in the basic poetry, so let's talk about them. Objective 1, who wants to read? Be loud. Be me. Level 4, projection, boys. Yes! Go right ahead, sir.
Okay. Production and distribution of writing.
Yes, sir, you're correct. What does that mean? Meaning, read the sentence right underneath that. You must follow. See it? Go down. Right there.
You must follow a process to generate a draft, reread and revise writing, edit for conventions, and share your writing.
Yes, production and distributions means that process. Drafting, editing, correcting, final drafting, and eventually being able to share it. Which obviously you don't want to share it while there are still mistakes in it. So the whole process of writing, you have all those pieces that you need. What's a level 3? Level 3 is where you want to be at, right? It's not over the top, but it's exactly where I want you to be at. Ma'am, read it loud and proud for us. Yeah.
Produces clear and
Coherent.
coherent writing in which the development, organization, and style are appropriate to task, purpose, and audience.
Yeah, that means your development, your organization, and your style are appropriate to what you're trying to do, and they get your ideas across to your audience. If that's where you're at, you got a 3. You're good to go. 4 and 2 are there if you want to read them. Sir, 2?
Vocabulary acquisition and use.
Yeah, vocabulary acquisition and use. So you hit the sentence underneath it.
Use appropriate sensory details, figurative language, and basic literary techniques, and analyze word choice and
Connotation.
Compose text using precise and vivid language.
So here, just use that sentence as a list. Sensory details. Details from your 5 sentences. Figurative language. Everything we talked about last time is up on that board. Literary techniques. That means things you've read that you know make for good writing. Word choice. How you use those words. Connotation. And compose text with precise and vivid language. That means exact, really clear language that shows what you know. Now, in a poem, this means picking the right words and the right way to use those words in order to, unscrew the top of your reader's head, take that image that's in your head, put that in their head, and screw it back on. You guys have all read those books or those stories where you almost lose the fact that you're reading words and can kind of see the pictures going on in your head? That is vocabulary acquisition and use. That's what we're going for with the vivid language, the precise language, the figurative language. Let's go with number 3. Number 3, knowledge of language. Wherever you went, and I like those glasses.
You know,
Yep.
you know how to use the English language to make your point.
You know how to use the English language to make your point. I really just tried to break it down to brass tacks and details there. You know how to use those pieces of language, and knowledge of language, our grades most of the time before were, nouns using and pronouns usage and verb usage. Now we're putting all those pieces together, and it's still the same knowledge of language. If you're trying to show action Are you using correct verb tense? If you're trying to describe, do you know the difference in using an adjective and an adverb? Do you know how to properly use a pronoun to substitute for a noun in a poem? To get a level 3, what do you need? Marissa? Yeah.
Use knowledge of language and its conventions when writing, speaking, reading, or listening with some errors that affect the overall effectiveness of the work.
That means it may not be perfect. Your description may not be perfect, but you can get your message across using the English language. Is that a very difficult expectation to meet? Negatory, good buddy. It is not hard at all. But you really have to think about what you're doing. You can't just kind of throw down words and be like, that's okay, that's good enough. The last one. Some would argue the most important one. Yes, sir. Loud.
Objective 4, behavior. Your behavior needs to be appropriate and aid you in finishing the project without having a negative impact on your grade. Your ability to finish the assignment on time and have no negative impact on the people around you.
So let me just review this whole thing. A level 2. Some errors, behavior impacted success negatively. That means you were off task, and either because of that behavior you didn't finish the project on time, or your quality of work went down. Your behavior had some negative impact on what was going on. I'm not going to lie to you, I see a lot more 2s now than I used to. Now that I'm letting you guys pick where you want to sit. But I'm letting you pick where you want to sit because it's kind of necessary in this project. You have to be able to move around and maybe work in a group if you're all working on the same poem with the same placemat. So, even though our situation has changed, the expectation has not. And the expectation is few errors, behavior aided successfully in completion. That means you didn't mess up often, but you are a normal human, and at some points you were a little bit off task, and I may have even had to say, hey, you, focus, get to it. And that's okay, because you are a person, not a little poetry robot. But your ending project was fine. It came out okay. Level 4, above. That is better behavior than I expect of any average 6th grader on any average day. Behavior constantly. Constantly means all the time. Aided in successful completion with no errors. You are, for all practical purposes, wearing a halo and duct tape. Because you have been so quiet, you have done nothing wrong for the whole 2 weeks before Christmas. Is it possible? Yeah. Is it likely? Not if it was me, but maybe if it's you. Put all 4 of these things together and you've got what we're doing until Christmas. Between 65 and 80 points. That's a lot. It's also more than double the amount of time we worked on the last assignment. And let me tell you why it's between 65 and 80. Some people got to that 25-point goal in the last one and showed it to me and said, what grades am I going to get? And you know I can always go through and kind of eyeball it and guess. And I said, you have no figurative language. This is a problem. It means you will fail to meet or fail to even register on one of these objectives. And they said, can I just flunk it? I said, no, you can't just flunk it. What's wrong with you? Go back and do another poem. And they ended up with 35 points worth of poetry, and it was all good once you added in the poems that met the figurative language objective. They just had too much. But because they had too much, I couldn't really punish them. That just showed me that they were willing to go a little bit over the top to make the grades that they needed to make. And if you're willing to go a little bit over the top to make the grades that you needed to make, that's above expectation. Above expectation is more than you needed to have. I'm going to let you throw that option in there. 65 is what I need. If you want to go above and beyond to show me you're willing to do the work to get that credit, that's all you, and that's all good. But I don't want you doing more than 80 points to drive yourself completely insane. And insane people do sometimes write good poetry. We'll talk about that when we talk about Han Shan. But I don't want you coming to class in a straight jacket. So 80 points is your maximum. No, I'm not going to stop rating it at 80 points if you have 81 points and write mean comments and funk you and stuff. But I don't want you going more than about 80. Also, before Christmas is a weird time of year. You never know what's going to happen and what's going to get thrown in. Sometimes you just may not be able to make it to 80 points, so I wanted to shoot a little bit low too. Poetry stations are up here. Those are your level 3. Can you still use level 1 and 2 for back there? Yeah, sure. Cool. Go ahead. Do I have to use level 3 ones? Well, do you want the grade? Yes. Of course you want the grade, so yes, you have to have at least one level 3 poem in this assignment. Your level 3 poems are dark humor poems, where you take a poem that is about something that should not necessarily be funny, but you kind of have to laugh at it anyway. In this station, one of the examples talks about the legless chickens ran wildly. Now, that's a very disturbing kind of image. Legless chickens, a little gross, a little weird. Close your eyes and picture chickens with no legs trying to run. And everybody starts to go, because it's really difficult to not laugh at that picture, even though it's kind of dark. It's a little weird and you don't feel like you should be laughing. That's why everybody's going, rather than just laughing out loud. There's another one that's a good example of that, but we'll get to that in a minute, because it's a good example of another kind too. Classicism poetry, where you write about things that were important to Greeks and Romans in a lyrical style poem, because Greeks and Romans had kind of separate points of view of life. If you're a Percy Jackson fan, this one could be for you. It is a Greek or Roman style of setup. Epic poetry, another popular type of poem in Greek and Roman times, are very long adventure narratives with a main hero. Very difficult. So if you choose to do this one, we're going to have to probably sit down and make a plan. It's a minimum of 25 stanzas. I had one that was worth 81 points done last year. Very, very high quality poem. Very, very difficult, but she was very, very committed and willing to sit down and do the work to make it work. Number 4, epitaph poetry. That is tombstone poetry. What is carved into a person's tombstone is sometimes a bold statement on their life. My favorite one is Mel Blanc, the Looney Tunes guy. This is an example of dark humor. That's all, folks. I feel like you need a little bit of for that one. That's all, folks. He's dead. And it's Porky the Pig song. At the end of all the Looney Tunes one, they go, that's all, folks. That's what Mel Blanc had carved into his tombstone. Dark humor and epitaph. Epithalalium. It's a very difficult one to pronounce. I've done my research and not really found a good way to pronounce it. But it's a poem that's dedicated to a bride and groom on their wedding day. There are some specific rules for it, but it's an interesting style of poem, and it's up here. A list poem is where you make a list in a poetic fashion. Not complicated, but to do it correctly, it takes a little more thought. Lyric poetry is song-style poetry. Ode poetry, thank you, sir, is poetry that is dedicated to something. There's a really funny one called Ode to Cheese up there. Somebody did another really funny one last year called Ode to Bacon. Romanticism is heart-shaped love poetry. Don't be gross. I don't want to hear about your love life. I want to hear about who's dating who. But if you want to write a poem about the emotion of love, that's cool. Romanticism poetry is not about, I love so-and-so so much. They're my boyfriend/girlfriend. They make me feel all fluttery, like I'm going to throw up, but in a good way. No, none of that. This is about the emotion of love. Why is it important? Why is love important? What does love do for people and societies and Earth? And the last one, rondeau, which is a rhyme scheme setup style of poetry. So, let's talk about Hans Schenk. He's our author study for today.